Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into something really crucial. We're demystifying the Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA. Just think for a second about the absolute largest construction megaprojects on the planet. I'm talking sprawling urban expansions, colossal dams that literally reroute entire rivers, endless networks of highways, massive energy grids, the whole shebang. Now, crazy enough, did you know that before the 1970s, a lot of these were built with virtually zero formal environmental oversight? I mean, we literally had situations where heavily polluted rivers were catching on fire because unchecked industrial development was just allowed to run rampant. So, the stakes for these megaprojects, they are incredibly high. On one hand, yeah, they represent human progress, economic growth, and vital infrastructure. But on the flip side, they possess the sheer physical power to completely alter or even devastate the natural ecosystems they're built right on top of.
Which brings us to a massive, really profound practical dilemma. How do we actually build without destroying? Because let's face it, we desperately need new infrastructure, right? But we also fiercely rely on the clean air, the clean water, and the biodiversity that our environment provides us. The answer to this dilemma isn't just, crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. Actually, it lies in a powerful, highly structured, and protective framework. It's a system designed specifically to catch catastrophic mistakes way before a single bulldozer ever fires up its engine.
So here's how we're going to break this all down today. First, we'll lay the foundation. Second, we'll walk through the 5-step process. Third, we'll look at the tools of the trade. Then we'll dive into some EIA case studies. And finally, we'll wrap up with the power of the stakeholders.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the foundation. What exactly is an EIA?
So let's define what we're actually talking about here. At its core, an environmental impact assessment, or EIA, is the formal framework used to evaluate a project's environmental safety. Now, I know it's incredibly easy to look at a highly technical term like this and just dismiss it as dry paperwork or, annoying regulatory red tape. But in reality, the EIA is the ultimate pause button. It forces engineers, developers, and governments to really look before they leap, systematically proving that their grand designs won't inadvertently trigger an environmental disaster. It effectively demands that anyone who wants to alter the landscape has to do their homework first, present their findings, and actually prove that the surrounding ecosystem can handle the shock of their proposed development. Moving right along to part 2, the gauntlet, the 5-step EIA process. You can really think of this entire process as the ultimate stress test for megaprojects. We aren't just taking a developer's word for it that everything's going to be perfectly fine. Oh no. Instead, proposed dams, mines, and highways are put through a rigorous hurdle race. Every single step is specifically designed to aggressively poke holes in the project's design. And if a project can't clear these hurdles and prove its safety, well, it gets sent all the way back to the drawing board to be redesigned, or in some cases, it gets canceled entirely. Let's actually walk through how this builds across 5 chronological phases. First up, we have screening. This is the initial vetting, essentially asking the basic question, does this project even need a full EIA? A local bakery opening up on Main Street? Probably not. But a massive new oil refinery? Absolutely, for sure, because of the sheer scale of potential emissions and local habitat disruption. Next up is scoping. This is where we draw the boundaries to figure out what matters most. Are we deeply concerned about the local aquifer, endangered wildlife, maybe severe noise pollution? We figure out exactly what the study needs to zero in on. Step 3 is the impact assessment itself. Now, this is the heavy lifting, where scientists and engineers predict exactly what's going to happen to the environment if the project goes forward. Step 4 is mitigation. If that assessment finds a serious problem, say a proposed highway cutting directly through a vital wildlife corridor, mitigation asks, okay, how do we fix this? The solution might literally be building a multi-million-dollar wildlife bridge over the highway just to reconnect that habitat. And finally, step 5, monitoring. This is the absolutely crucial long-term oversight phase. It basically ensures that the developers actually keep their environmental promises and build that wildlife bridge exactly as they agreed to during those first 4 steps.
That brings us to part 3, the detective kit, tools of the trade.
Let's unpack this analytical matrix. I like to think of these tools as the magnifying glasses and fingerprint dusters in our environmental detectives toolkit. First, we have GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, which is applied for spatial analysis. This allows teams to layer incredibly complex satellite data, like topography, hydrology, and vegetation, so they can visually see exactly where a new development might intersect with, say, a critical wetland. Next is LCA, or Life Cycle Analysis. Its application is life cycle tracking. This means we're not just looking at the direct construction phase. We are looking at the entire cradle-to-grave environmental cost.
If we're building a massive battery plant, LCA tracks the impact of extracting the raw lithium, operating the facility for 30 years, and finally, safely tearing it all down. Finally, we've got risk assessment. This is all about threat quantification. It's basically putting hard math to the probability of worst-case scenarios, like calculating the precise downstream scale of the fallout if a chemical containment system were to fail during a once-in-a-century flood.
All right, let's look at part 4, Real-World Arenas, EIA Case Studies. This comparison brilliantly illustrates just how incredibly flexible this whole EIA framework really has to be. Consider the massive differences between the energy sector and the mining sector. The fundamental EIA process? It's identical for both, but the specific threats they're hunting for are wildly different. Take a new hydroelectric dam in the energy sector, for example. The EIA there might focus intensely on the alteration of historical river flows, or the disruption of seasonal fish migration patterns, or even the loss of downstream sediment. Now contrast that with a heavy mining operation, where the focus pivots entirely to completely different variables. Suddenly, those same scientists are hyper-focused on the threat of groundwater contamination from toxic leach pads, massive topsoil degradation, and the structural integrity of tailing dams. The EIA acts as this amazing universal framework that perfectly bends and adapts to whatever unique environmental challenge is placed right in front of it.
And finally, part 5, the human element, power of the stakeholders.
You know, science and data are obviously incredible tools, but an EIA is honestly kind of useless if it exists in a total vacuum. And that is exactly where the stakeholders come in. This group includes local residents, indigenous communities, regional environmental experts, and local business owners. Their role in the EIA process is absolutely vital. See, public involvement ensures that local, lived-in knowledge is added directly to those high-level scientific models. Just imagine a team of engineers looking at a pristine GIS satellite map of a river. The map looks perfectly safe for a new facility. But the local stakeholders who have literally lived there for generations, they know that specific river floods 3 times a year in highly unpredictable ways that those satellites completely miss. By giving the public a real voice in the scoping and mitigation phases, the EIA stops being this top-down dictate from distant developers. Instead, it transforms into a dynamic, democratic negotiation about our shared environment. They serve as the ultimate auditors of the data. Which brings us to our final thought for today. What is the future of development in your own community? Seriously, look out your window right now. Is there a new highway being planned? A sprawling industrial park? Maybe a massive housing development? Well, behind those construction signs and temporary fences is an environmental impact assessment, a rigorous gauntlet of science, strategic planning, and public opinion. The framework is firmly in place to protect our ecosystems, but here's the catch. It only truly works when we, the stakeholders, actually understand it and actively participate in it. So keep learning, keep asking questions about the development going on around you, and I will see you in the next explainer.